Dust hung low in the still summer air, swirling like ash across the cracked ground of Whitlock, a sunburnt dot on the edge of the frontier. The town had once boomed with miners and tradesmen and promise, but now it stood tired, its windows half-shuttered and its hope bled dry. Only the sound of boots scraping wooden boards and the dull hum of electric clippers pierced the late afternoon silence. Two women sat side by side on rough-hewn stools in the center of the square, hands bound behind them with hemp rope, backs straight with practiced defiance. They were heavy-set, their faces swollen, not from gluttony but from sleepless nights, weeping in silence. Their cheeks were red from the heat and shame, but they did not cry. They sat like stones, unmoving as the crowd gathered, flanked by two enforcers holding buzzing clippers with the cruelty of boys gutting trout. Hair fell in tufts to the dusty earth, clumps of black and chestnut, long enough to have once been woven or tied or kissed. May's hands twitched against the ropes. Rose's jaw clenched. They didn't look at the crowd. They looked straight ahead, toward nothing. People stood packed along the edges of the square, eyes wide, mouths shut. Most didn't want to be there, but they came anyway. That's how Whitlock worked now. You watched or you became what was being watched. A voice, a sharp whisper, cut through the tension. "This ain't right," someone muttered behind a wall of men. "Not them, not like this." Another voice hissed back. "Quiet. Mayor said it's punishment. Collaborators, don't matter if they're women." The mayor. That was who they feared more than God these days. No one moved. The sun continued to fall. The clippers buzzed on. A streak of gray hair drifted down Rose's front like a lost feather. Then came the sound. Distant, uneven hoofbeats? No. Footsteps. Heavy, staggered, ragged breathing followed. A figure emerged from between two buildings, pushing through a cluster of townsfolk with the force of someone who'd already made peace with violence. His coat was torn down the shoulder, smeared in dust and blood. One boot had come half loose, revealing a soaked bandage wrapped around his ankle. The brim of his hat was curled and broken, shadowing a face gaunt with pain and purpose. He didn't shout at first, he just walked, ignoring the rifles that rose slowly in his direction, the voices that muttered warnings. He kept coming until he stood 10 feet from the two women. Then he lifted his head and said, voice raw and sure, "They're mine now." Silence cracked across the square like lightning. The enforcer holding May's clippers stopped mid-shear. Hair clung to the blades. His hand trembled just enough to notice. The other man straightened, reaching for the revolver at his hip but not drawing it yet. The crowd turned to face the stranger. Some recognized him. Most hadn't seen him in over 2 years. Sam Lorne. Sam Devil's Eye Lorne, once the best shot this side of the Mississippi. Once a farmer with soft hands and calloused hope. Once a husband. Now just a shadow, beaten, unwashed, limping. The mayor's voice hadn't yet spoken, but they all knew what would happen next. You couldn't show up in Whitlock and make a claim like that anymore. Not under Mayor Hobbs. Sam moved forward another step. "I said," he repeated, his eyes locked on the men with the clippers. "They're mine." "Sam," Rose said suddenly, her voice breaking for the first time in days. "Don't." It was soft, but everyone heard it. The moment cracked, then exploded. A rifle clicked behind Sam. He turned just enough to see 3 men stepping forward, Hobbs's enforcers, well-fed, well-armed, loyal. Sam raised a hand slowly and pulled open the flap of his coat, revealing the revolver tucked into his belt. "Easy," he said. "I ain't come for blood." "You're bleeding already," one of the men snapped. "I came to stop yours," Sam answered. Mayor Hobbs finally stepped out from behind the wagon that served as a stage for his proclamations. He was a large man, with a belly that rolled like wheat sacks, and a mouth that never smiled unless it meant cruelty. His hat sat pristine. His hands were gloved. His voice was smooth as river mud. "Sam Lorne," Hobbs said, "didn't expect to see you back from the grave. Thought you ran off after the fire." The word hung heavy. Fire. Sam's jaw tensed, but he didn't rise to the bait. "Let them go. They harbored a fugitive," Hobbs said calmly. "Helped a half-breed escape judgment. You know what the law says about traitors. They nursed a dying man, gave him food and water. They sheltered him, just like your wife did, before she, well, you remember." A murmur rippled through the crowd. No one had ever said it aloud, not like that. Sam's hand hovered over his pistol. For a moment it seemed like he might draw. Rose's voice cut through again. "Don't," she said. "Not for us." But Sam didn't look at her. He stared at Hobbs. "You want me," he said. "Let them go and take me." A pause. Even the wind held its breath. Hobbs chuckled, low and dry. And why would I take a broken fool when I've already got what I need? Sam looked back at May, who nodded once. Her eyes said everything: anger, fear, shame, gratitude. He turned back to Hobbs. Because they're innocent, and I'm not. You're right about that, Hobbs said, smiling now. You abandoned your wife to die, you left your land to rot, and now you think showing up here makes you righteous? No, Sam said. But it makes me ready. The sky darkened. A cloud moved over the sun. The wind picked up and kicked dust into the air. The clippers still buzzed, but no one touched them. Every eye was on Sam. Boys, Hobbs said finally. Take him. The enforcers advanced. Sam moved faster. He didn't go for his gun. He dove straight at the clippers, knocking the nearest man backward and sending the device skittering across the dirt. The second enforcer reached for his weapon, but Sam grabbed his wrist and drove a knee into his gut, forcing him to double over. The crowd scattered in gasps and yells. Women pulled children behind wagons. Men fumbled for weapons, unsure whether to help or run. Sam cut Rose's bonds with a jagged piece of broken metal from the clippers, then turned to May. Blood trickled down his forehead from where he'd been struck in the scuffle, but he worked quickly, breath sharp in his throat. Can you run? He asked. Rose stood, hands free, rubbing at her wrists. We can try. May was slower to rise, her knees buckled, and Sam caught her. We've got to go, he said. Now! Gunfire cracked, one shot, then two. Sam yanked the women down behind an overturned crate. A bullet tore through the corner of the stool where May had just been sitting. They crawled through the dust, weaving behind barrels and crates, the crowd too stunned to react properly. Sam spotted a narrow alley between two buildings and guided the women that way, limping, one arm around May to keep her steady. Behind them, Hobbs's voice echoed like thunder. Bring them back alive, he shouted. Him, I don't care, dead or dying. Sam ducked into the alley, dragging the women behind him. The wind howled louder now. A storm was coming. You could smell it in the air, ozone and smoke and something worse. Rose glanced back as they ran. The square had emptied, but Hobbs's men were forming a line, rifles in hand, preparing to sweep the streets. Sam led them through twisted back roads and across the dried riverbed that once split Whitlock from the hills. The trees beyond bent like old men in prayer, brittle and dry. Thunder rolled above, but no rain yet. They reached the edge of the woods and collapsed beneath a crooked oak. Sam was heaving, clutching his side. His shirt was soaked with blood, not all of it fresh. Rose tore a piece of cloth from her sleeve and pressed it against his ribs. We can't stay here long, she whispered. I know, Sam said, barely audible, but you're free, that's what matters. We were never free, May said, her voice rasping. We just lived quieter. Sam didn't answer. He stared at the sky. Rain finally began to fall, soft at first, then heavier. The storm was here, but for now, they were alive, and Hobbs was still watching. They would come again, but Sam wasn't afraid anymore. He'd already come back from death once. The next time, he would bring the fire with him. Rain struck the leaves like the beat of a war drum, hard and fast and unrelenting. It masked their footsteps as Sam led the sisters deeper into the forest, the sound of pursuit fading behind them. He kept his head low and eyes scanning for signs of movement, broken branches, shadows that didn't belong, footprints melting in the mud. The storm had come fast and with purpose, as if the sky itself had decided it was time to wash Whitlock clean. They didn't speak, not even when Sam stumbled, his leg nearly giving way beneath him. The bandage wrapped around his ankle was soaked through, blood mingling with the red clay underfoot. May glanced at him, her lips tight. She wanted to offer help, but he shook his head and pressed forward. At the base of a moss-covered ridge, he finally stopped, motioning for silence with one raised hand. A shallow cave, no wider than a wagon bed, yawned open beneath the hill. It was dark, damp, and offered barely enough room for the three of them to crouch inside, but it was shelter. Once inside, Sam slumped against the rock wall and let out a slow groan. May sank beside him, soaked to the skin, hair clinging to her face in damp strands. Rose kept watch at the entrance, her arms wrapped around her knees, eyes scanning the trees. You're going to bleed out, May said, voice hushed. Sam didn't argue. He'd known that since the first mile out of town. Still, hearing it said aloud settled something grim in his gut. She tore a strip from her skirt and moved to his side. He didn't flinch when she pulled away the old dressing. The wound was angry, deep, jagged, likely infected. She cleaned it the best she could with a bit of water from her flask and tightened the bandage. "You're lucky it missed the bone," she muttered. "Lucky," he repeated, the word dry and hollow on his tongue. "Why'd you come back, Sam?" Rose asked from the cave's mouth. He looked at her, then down at his hands. They were shaking, though whether from pain or something else he couldn't tell. "Because I owed someone more than a grave," he said. "And I thought if I saved you, maybe I'd save a piece of her too." "Sarah?" May asked. Sam nodded. "She helped us once," Rose said quietly, "before Hobbs outlawed kindness." Sam closed his eyes. Rain pattered against the stone above, filling the silence. Night fell fast. The storm cooled but didn't end. Thunder rolled now and then, a distant reminder that nature too had its fury. They took turns sleeping in the cramped shelter, but none of them truly rested. Even in exhaustion, their minds circled back to the same thought. Hobbs would come. He wouldn't let this stand. When the first rays of morning filtered through the trees, pale and gold and uncertain, Sam was already awake, sharpening a stick with his belt knife. "We need to move," he said. "They'll track us through the mud." "We have no horses," May replied. "I know, but I remember these woods. There's a trail that runs east near the old mining camp. If we reach it we can disappear, or at least buy time." "What if we're followed?" "We will be, but I've got something Hobbs wants more than revenge." Rose looked at him. "What?" "My name." He stood and tested his leg. It held, barely. They left the cave behind and moved through the forest with care. Sam led, carving a faint trail through the undergrowth, eyes constantly flicking to the edges. He didn't speak much, and neither did the women. The air between them was heavy with unspoken truths and questions too dangerous to voice. By midday, they reached the edge of the camp, or what remained of it. Rusted rails curled like dead snakes through overgrown brush. A collapsed mine shaft yawned behind a line of blackened timbers. The place reeked of decay and abandonment, but it offered one gift: silence. They took refuge in what had once been a bunkhouse, its roof half-caved and its floor littered with debris. Sam collapsed onto a cot, breathing hard. May retrieved a handful of roots from her pack and began preparing a bitter tea that might stave off infection. Rose disappeared for a while, returning with a rusted axe head she could use to reinforce the doorway. It was there, in that ruin, that their fear began to harden into resolve. Later that evening, as wind whispered through the broken walls, a sound reached their ears. Not footsteps, not horses, music. Soft, low, breathy, notes carried on a wooden flute. It came from the trees, not far off, a melody full of sorrow, ancient and deliberate. Sam rose instantly, hand on his revolver. "I know that sound," he said. From the trees stepped a tall figure, face shrouded by a leather cowl, feathers bound to one shoulder, a blade sheathed across his back. He walked with a hunter's stillness, no wasted movement, no sound but the tune he played. The women stepped back. Sam did not. "Riven," he said. The man stopped. His face remained hidden, but his posture softened at the name. "Been a long time," Sam said. Still, the man didn't speak. Sam lowered his weapon. "I don't have the right to ask, but I will." The man took the flute from his lips, tied it to a strap across his chest, and stepped closer. His eyes, when visible beneath the hood, were sharp and unreadable, eyes that had seen too much. "I heard," he said at last. "The town changed hands." "It did," Sam replied. "And the women? They didn't deserve it." Riven looked at Rose and May, then back to Sam. "Most people don't, but that doesn't stop men like Hobbs." He crossed the threshold and knelt by the fire pit in the center of the bunkhouse, wordlessly striking flint to steel. A small flame sparked, then bloomed. In its light, his features became clearer, scarred cheek, sun-worn skin, an expression carved from stone. Sam sat beside him. "I thought you were done," he said. Riven glanced at him. "You're not the first. I've got 2 days, maybe less, before Hobbs finds us. 3, if you draw him the wrong way. Will you help?" Riven didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into a pouch and tossed something into the fire. A mix of herbs and leaves, the scent that rose was sharp, cleansing, familiar. He turned to the women. Do you trust him? Rose looked at Sam, then back at the warrior. He came for us when no one else would. May nodded. He didn't ask us to trust him. He earned it. Riven stared into the flame, then pulled out a carved stick of cedar and began drawing symbols in the dirt. Lines, circles, marks that meant little to anyone else but seemed to calm him. I'll help, he said. But not for him. He looked at the women. For you. They didn't thank him. They knew it wasn't needed. That night Sam slept better than he had in years. Not because he was safe, he wasn't, but because, for once, he wasn't alone in the fight. They rose early the next morning. Riven led them through a hidden trail that ran parallel to the eastern ridge, known only to a handful of hunters and scouts. He moved like a ghost, barely disturbing the ground. Sam followed close behind, watching every movement, learning again how to be silent. Behind them, Rose and May moved with growing confidence, no longer captives, survivors now. At midday, they paused at a stream to drink. Sam crouched beside Riven, watching the trees. You think he'll find us? He asked. Riven nodded. Hobbs is a coward, but he's smart. And he has dogs. Sam exhaled through his nose. Then we give him something else to chase. Riven raised an eyebrow. I go back, Sam said. Draw him west. You take the women east. No, May said behind him. You die alone. We die anyway. I won't let him touch you again. We won't let him take you, Rose by Died. We do this together. Riven didn't argue. He just passed Sam a bow freshly strung. Then we make our stand. They returned to the mining camp. There, in the ruins, they began to set traps, clever snares across narrow paths, broken glass under leaves, sharpened stakes hidden beneath mud. Riven taught them how to listen for unnatural silence, how to smell tobacco from afar, how to track men the way men tracked deer. Sam taught them how to shoot. May was a better aim than she realized. Rose learned fast. By dusk, they stood in a circle around the fire. Sam looked at each of them. His hands were no longer shaking. He'll come tomorrow, he said. Then we greet him, Riven answered. And if we fall? May asked. Then we fall knowing we stood, Rose replied. Thunder rumbled again, distant but moving closer. Under that blood-red sky they waited, not as fugitives, but as a wall built from scarred hands and borrowed strength. Sam knew Hobbs would bring hell, but this time hell would have to fight for it. Night passed without sleep. The four of them sat in the dark, waiting. No fire this time, only cold steel, nerves like coiled wire, and the sound of wind scraping through broken beams. The forest whispered warnings none of them could interpret. In the blackness, Sam sat with his back against a splintered post, cradling the revolver that once belonged to his father. His wounded leg pulsed with heat. The infection had crept higher, and every breath was a gamble between strength and collapse. But he didn't show it. He couldn't afford to. Riven moved like smoke between shadow and starlight, checking traps, listening to the earth for the tremor of hooves. Rose lay on her stomach, rifle cradled beneath her chin, eyes fixed on the main trail. May sat just behind her, hand resting on her sister's boot, more for reassurance than readiness. Sam exhaled, eyes half closed. It's almost time. 3 riders, Riven said, emerging from the trees like a wraith. Maybe 4, another half-mile off. 2 dogs. Sam nodded. He's coming himself. He wants to be sure. He wants to see us fall. Riven crouched beside him. Then we don't give him the pleasure. A new silence settled over the camp. Tense, anticipatory, sacred. The last breath before battle. Then came the first sound, a low growl, a flash of movement. The dogs broke the perimeter first, sleek black hounds with frothing mouths and yellow eyes. They moved fast, their barks echoing across the ruined bunkhouse. Rose fired first. The shot cracked like thunder, and one dog went down, yelping and tumbling through wet grass. The other leapt over the body, clearing a log, teeth bared. Riven didn't move. He waited until it was 10 feet away, then snapped a short spear upward from the brush. The dog impaled itself mid-leap, twisting in agony before falling silent. Then the men came. Hobbs rode at the front, rifle resting across his saddle like a royal scepter. He wore black, too pristine for the trail. Behind him came 3 others, all scarred and grim, eyes sweeping the trees for signs of ambush. Sam rose from behind a collapsed beam, gun raised. He didn't shout, he didn't warn, he simply fired. The first shot clipped the lead rider's shoulder, knocking him sideways. Chaos exploded. The two remaining men dismounted fast, disappearing into the tree line. Hobbs remained on horseback, scanning for Sam, jaw set like iron. "Sam Lorne," he shouted, "you think you can erase the past in a day?" Sam fired again. The bullet missed, striking bark and sending splinters flying. "You forget who I am," Hobbs called, wheeling his horse to face the ruins. "I brought this town from nothing. I carved law into the hills with fire and blood." "You carved fear," Sam replied, "and called it order." A shot rang out from the left. One of Hobbs's men stumbled out of the trees, hand clutching his thigh. Riven emerged behind him, silent and merciless. The man tried to lift his rifle, but a second arrow ended the struggle. May ran to Sam's side, passing him a fresh cartridge. He loaded it with a shaking hand, then turned to her. "You know what to do." May nodded, eyes fierce. From the other side of the ruins, Rose fired again. Another enemy down. Only Hobbs remained, backpedaling now, reins tight as his horse fought the scent of blood. He fired once, aimed badly. The bullet struck a wall and ricocheted harmlessly. Sam stepped into view, revolver aimed dead center at the mayor's chest. "Get off the horse," he said. Hobbs hesitated. "I won't ask again." With a grunt, Hobbs slid from the saddle, boots sinking into wet earth. He raised his hands, the rifle dangling from one finger by the trigger guard. "You look like hell," he said. Sam limped forward, May close behind him, rifle raised and locked on Ho. "BS." "So do you," Sam said. "Difference is, I earned it." "You think this makes you better?" Hobbs sneered. "One good deed after years of silence, you abandoned her." Sam didn't flinch. "I know. You let her die. I live with that every day. You want to kill me? Go on. But that won't change the blood on your hands." "I don't need it to," Sam said. He stepped closer, raising the pistol. May reached out, her voice shaking. "Sam, don't." He stopped. The forest stilled. Even the wind held its breath. Hobbs smirked, sensing the hesitation. "Can't do it, can you? You're just like her. Weak." Sam lowered the gun. "I'm nothing like her," he said. "She was better than any of us. You broke her spirit. That's why you're afraid." "I'm not afraid of you," Hobbs spat. "No," Sam said softly. "You're afraid of the world without fear." Then Rose appeared behind him, rifle in hand, face calm. "Drop it," she said. Hobbs looked between them. Sam, May, Rose, and the distant shape of Riven behind him. He let the rifle fall. "Go," Sam said. "Don't come back." "You'd spare me?" "I'm not sparing you," Sam replied. "I'm leaving you to rot in the shell you built. You walk back into that town alone, and they'll see what you really are. You lose everything." Hobbs's face contorted, then settled into a mask of bitter calculation. He walked, no words, no glance back. They watched him go until the sound of his steps faded into the distance. The silence afterward was not peace, it was a stunned, trembling quiet. May slumped against the wall, tears in her eyes. Rose placed her rifle down gently and sat beside her. Sam leaned on a broken beam, eyes closed, pain rushing in where adrenaline had lived. Riven stood beside him, arms crossed. "You should have killed him." "I know." Riven said nothing more. He understood. They buried the dead in the clearing beneath the oaks. No prayers, just dirt, stone, and silence. Later Rose found Sam seated by the collapsed mineshaft, staring into the dark. "He'll come back," she said. "Not the same. You could have ended him. He has already ended himself. I just let him see it." Rose sat beside him. For a while, they said nothing. "He told the truth, you know," she said, "about you abandoning Sarah." Sam didn't flinch. "I know. She never blamed you, even when she was dying." He looked at her then. "You were there?" "She sent for me," Rose said. "Said she wanted her sister close. Said you would come back eventually. But if you didn't, I should forgive you anyway." Sam's voice cracked. "I don't deserve that." "Doesn't matter." She reached into her coat and handed him a small cloth bundle. Inside was a locket, brass, worn, engraved with Sarah's initials. He opened it. Her portrait, sketched in charcoal, smiled up at him with unbearable softness. "I thought it burned," he whispered. "She gave it to me." Said if you ever came back, this was all she needed to say. Sam clutched the locket like it might vanish. The next day they left the camp behind. Riven parted ways before sunrise. He said no goodbyes, just handed Sam a carved flute and nodded once before melting into the trees. Sam watched him go, then turned to Rose and May. We'll head north, he said. There's a ridge that overlooks the plains. Sarah's buried there. They walked for hours through dew-covered brush, the land softening as they rose from shadow to sunlight. The weight of the past rode on their backs, but their steps felt lighter. Atop the ridge, the plains stretched out like an endless quilt of gold and rust. They found the grave beneath a lone cottonwood, its bark pale and peeling. Sam knelt, pressing the locket into the soil. He didn't speak. There were no words left. Only breath, only silence. May placed a flower on the mound. Rose stood beside her, arms crossed. When they turned to leave, Sam lingered, then he followed. By midday, they were gone from the ridge, lost in the wide open. Behind them, the wind balls stirred the branches gently, the soil undisturbed but newly alive. Redemption had no parade, no witnesses, no glory, only the quiet of a promise kept, and the road ahead waiting to be walked. Somewhere, far away, a flute played. Soft, low, carried on the wind.